Will you agree to provide members of this committee with 5-year financial projections showing how the reforms and changes you've outlined, including the continued implementation of Delivering for America, like including the Regional Transportation Optimization Initiative, would affect the service's financial position and service performance over 5 years?
Yes. And
welcome back to Freedom Forge. If you believe in truth, accountability, and standing up for the values that built strong nations, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel, because here we don't dodge reality, we confront it head on. Today, we're reacting to a Senate hearing that focuses on the future of the United States Postal Service, but more importantly, exposes serious concerns about oversight, financial management, and whether this system is truly being run in a way that respects the American taxpayer. This hearing dives into issues like long-term financial projections, failures to comply with labor agreements, and questions about whether the Postal Service can responsibly manage even more complex financial responsibilities going forward.
Gentlemen, Mr. Walkinshaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for suffering my presence again on this subcommittee. I have a couple of UC requests, if that's all right.
With that, please feel free to
Ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a March 5th, 2026 letter signed by 66 members of Congress, including 15 senators and 51 members of the House, urging the Department of Commerce to reverse course on a flawed 2026 census test.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a report released by the Department of Commerce, IG, on March 16, 2026, evaluating the methodology employed by the Bureau for the upcoming 2026 test involving Postal Service workers. It outlines the IG's concerns that the proposed approach could compromise readiness for the 2030 census.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Steiner, thank you for being with us today, and thank you for the conversation that we had and your open engagement with this subcommittee. For Congress to make informed decisions about how we can ensure the Postal Service's long-term stability, we need clear data on the proposals you put forward, where the Postal Service stands, and where it's headed. Frankly, your predecessor, in my view, was sometimes hostile towards our role in congressional oversight, didn't want to provide information we needed to be able to help the Postal Service. Will you agree to provide members of this committee with 5-year financial projections showing how the reforms and changes you've outlined, including the continued implementation of Delivering for America, like including the Regional Transportation Optimization Initiative, would affect the service's financial position and service performance over 5 years?
Yes, and in fact, during the break, I was speaking with David about that what I think we can put together, because it's all the mandates that I talked about. We can put together multiple scenarios where you have different outcomes, right? And so if you assume the 6 or 7 mandates that I've talked, there's probably 5 or 6 other ones. We'll make assumptions on which ones happen and which ones don't. And so we'll have multiple budgets for you to say, if you want this one, we can go this direction. If you still want this mandate, we can go this direction. We can actually put it together for you that it will show the effect of all the different mandates that I've talked about and how that would affect the 5-year plan.
Because if we're going to build support for any of the proposals, including maybe the lower hanging fruit like investing the retirement funds, we got to be able to go to our colleagues and say, this is where we're headed in a positive direction. Okay.
Absolutely.
According to a recent IG report, the Postal Service spent roughly $860 million in remedies due to failing to comply with respective CBAs. So given that the challenge the Postal Service has had in complying with its own CBAs that you all agreed to, you maybe will forgive my skepticism that you would be able to successfully take over and run the Federal Employees Compensation Act and workers' comp programs as you provided. I'm a little bit skeptical of that given the challenging track record.
Yeah, I don't blame you for the skepticism. But the workers' comp would actually be managed by a third party. We manage, obviously, the claims you're talking about. The workers' comp would actually be managed by a third party.
So you would outsource that?
Yeah, I mean, basically every company in America outsources that.
Okay. I want to go to one of the maybe low-hanging fruit reforms, and you and I had a good conversation about the investment, and I had an ounce of skepticism, and you relieved me of my skepticism, I think, in our conversation. Can you talk through, though, because obviously it's not as simple as saying you can invest the funds, right? There would have to be a structure in place to guide that, so especially the workers and retirees have a voice in how their money's being invested.
Right.
What kind of structure do you envision to accomplish that?
Yeah, I think you'd want to put a board of directors, if you will, in charge of that, really an investment committee. I think I love the idea of having representatives of the employees be part of that. I think that's a great idea. The proposals I've seen would have, for example, the Secretary of the Treasury, so you would have a broad-based representative group to make those ultimate investment decisions. But then you could also have parameters to say, you're not going to go out and invest in crypto. You could set parameters and say, here are your allowed investments, and make those rather conservative, right? Because we don't want to be out there gambling with our retirees' money. And then you get an oversight board with broad-based experience to manage that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Mr. Walker, thank you very much.
Now let's break this down, because what you're about to hear is a clear example of why people are losing trust in government institutions. Right from the beginning, the discussion centers on something that should be basic: transparency. Lawmakers are asking for 5-year financial projections. Not guesses, not vague statements. Real numbers, real scenarios, real accountability. And why is that so important? Because if Congress is going to make decisions that affect millions of Americans and billions of dollars, they need to know exactly where this system is headed. And to be fair, the response here is more cooperative than what we've seen in the past. There's a willingness to provide multiple financial scenarios based on different mandates and policy choices. That's a step in the right direction. But let's not pretend this is something extraordinary. This is the bare minimum. Transparency should not be optional in government. It should be the standard. Then we get into something that should really raise eyebrows. According to the Inspector General, the Postal Service has spent roughly $860 million in remedies due to failing to comply with its own agreements. Think about that. Nearly $1 billion lost, not because of external challenges, but because the system couldn't even follow its own rules. Now ask yourself this. If an organization can't manage its own agreements without costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, why would anyone trust it to take on even more responsibility? That's exactly the concern raised in this hearing when the idea comes up about the Postal Service potentially managing workers' compensation programs. And the skepticism is completely justified. The response is that it would be outsourced to a third party, which, ironically, proves the point. Even they recognize that the private sector is better equipped to handle certain functions. This is something we see over and over again. Government expands its role, struggles to manage it efficiently, and then ends up relying on private entities anyway. So the question becomes, why not start there in the first place? Now, one of the more interesting parts of this hearing is the discussion about investing retirement funds. Right now, those funds are limited in how they can be invested, which restricts potential returns. The proposal is to allow more flexibility, potentially increasing long-term financial stability. And on the surface, that sounds like a good idea. But here's where we need to be cautious. You're talking about managing the retirement savings of workers. That's not something you experiment with. That's not something you gamble on. To their credit, the proposal includes safeguards, an oversight board, conservative investment guidelines, and representation from employees. That's important, but it still raises a bigger question. Should a system that's already struggling financially be trusted to manage complex investment strategies? This is where a lot of Americans start to lose confidence. Because what we're seeing is a pattern. Financial instability, operational inefficiencies, and then proposals to expand responsibilities instead of fixing the core issues first. That's backwards. As a patriot, I believe in strong institutions. I believe in taking care of workers, protecting retirees, and maintaining essential services. But I also believe in competence. I believe in accountability. And I believe that if something isn't working, You fix it before you expand it. What this hearing shows us is a system that is trying to do too much while struggling to do the basics right. And that brings us to the bigger picture. This isn't just about the Postal Service. This is about how government operates. It's about whether decisions are being made based on results or based on politics. It's about whether taxpayer money is being treated with respect or taken for granted. Because at the end of the day, every dollar spent comes from the people. And those people deserve a system that works. So when you watch this hearing, don't just focus on the technical details. Look at the pattern. Look at the accountability. Look at the responses. And ask yourself whether this is the kind of system you trust to manage critical services and financial responsibilities. If you believe in transparency, responsibility, and putting the American people first, then you're in the right place. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to Freedom Forge, and stay informed because we're going to keep breaking down these issues and bringing you the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it might be.